So how strong is Grafaiai in the competitive meta? So Grafaiai is one of the new Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, and it is also quite unique in that it is the first Pokemon with the normal poison typing. So diving right into that typing, we can see here that the offense of this typing is not the best. You have Poison's offense onto Grass and Fairy, but neither Poison or Normal can do a lot of damage to Rock and especially Steel. So the offensive coverage is actually not great from these two typings. Defensively, however, is not bad. You do have the Ghost immunity as well as 4 types that you resist, and you're only weak to Ground and Psychic, 2 typings that are commonly not together, making covering these weaknesses kind of easy to do. Now, if this were to be an offensive threat, the typing's really not great for it, but this Pokemon plays much better as a support, in which this typing is fine for the job. So Grafaiai gets access to 3 abilities. We have Unburden, which your speed doubles once your held item is consumed. Poison Touch, so if the Pokemon's attacks make physical contact, there's a 30% chance that the target is poisoned. And finally, there is Prankster, which gives you speed priority on status moves. Which of the 3 abilities, Prankster is the obvious choice. There are a few scenarios where Unburden could be better if there's a lot of anti-priority in the meta, then Unburden would technically be better to have than Prankster. However, 9 out of 10 times Prankster is going to be the ideal choice. Poison Touch doesn't really help this thing because it's not an offensive threat, and there's much better statuses you would want to inflict than Poison. Now, moving into stats, we do have a very nice 110 base speed, as well as a reasonably decent offensive stat of 95. Now, the bulk stats are not super great here, and you're likely not going to survive a really strong, super effective hit, so Focus Sash looks like a good option to have on this if you want it to last longer than 1 hit. Now, the special attack is also 80, which is a good bit lower than the physical attack, but you're not going to be using this offensively anyway, so it's essentially a stat you can just ignore. Now, part of what makes Grafaiai's kit so interesting is its signature move, Doodle, which basically sketches a target and then gives both it and its ally the ability of the target. And this is a great move to catch really strong abilities and give that ability to the Pokemon on your side. For example, if you predict your opponent will lead a Zoomeril and you're going to chance that it's huge power, you could use Doodle onto it and give both the Pokemon on your side huge power, which if you have like a Gyarados or Garchomp on your side, that thing's going to be hitting really hard. So there's some really interesting options you can do with this move, and I've really only seen it used for slacking, but I do think this could be explored further, and probably will as the meta develops. Now, this does also have Taunt, which is a great move to have on a Prankster that gives you Prankster Taunt to try to counter Trick Room setters, and Switcheroo if you want to run Iron Ball or Lagging Tail, or even Choice Scarf, you could do that too. Now, as for attacking moves, it does get Acid Spray, which is always a great move to have access to. Harshly lowering the defense stat is never a bad thing, and the 40 damage that it does can break a sash. But if you want to try to get a little bit of damage, you're probably going to run either Poison Jab or Gunk Shot, which depending on your EV spread, Gunk Shot could be quite helpful against Sylveon, assuming you can connect it. Now, this does also have access to Sunny Day and Rain Dance as a way to counter weather teams, and I've seen Rain Dance used on me before as a way to answer my weather. This also does get Foul Play, which might be the best offensive move it has, actually, all things considered. Prankster Metronome, how funny. Now, one interesting thing, this does get Sword Stance as well as Baton Pass, so you could go for a Prankster Sword Stance into a Prankster Baton Pass as a way to boost something in the back. But also it has Nasty Plot, so you can do it for either physical attack or special attack. It's a really interesting option, and while that's not really the most consistent thing in the world, you could catch somebody off guard with that, and it could be a reasonable out to have access to. Another offensive option is just running Super Fang to cut your opponent's hit points in half. Copycat's also an interesting option. If you want to use this to answer Trick Room, you can just run Copycat on it, and then let a Trick Room setter use Trick Room, and the next turn you use Prankster Copycat to undo the Trick Room. And this is one of the few Pokemon that get access to Parting Shot, so you can also use this to lower attack and special attack with the Prankster priority, while also switching out with another Pokemon in your party. So there are some really good supportive options here, making this a viable choice just as a support. I do think Grafaiai is slightly more useful than something like Sableye, while both of those Pokemon do seem kind of gimmicky after turn 1. I think Grafaiai's moveset is actually a little bit better because Prankster Parting Shot can let it rotate out while also lowering your opponent's offense, which if you're fighting special attackers will be a lot more useful than Will-O-Wisp on Sableye. Though I do think Murkrow is probably the better prankster currently, just because that Prankster Tailwind is very good, and Prankster Haze is also quite a good option to have in this game, something that Grafaiai does not do. So overall, it kind of sits in the middle of the prankster users. I don't think it's the worst one, but it's definitely not the best one, because it's a bit more reliant on gimmicks than consistency. So if I had to place this in a tier list, it'd probably be somewhere around B tier, and currently I do think it is underexplored. It's usually just paired with Slacking, and that's all I ever see it paired with. But we'll see how the meta develops if this ends up being considered much better in the future. But for now, it's just a fun, slightly gimmicky prankster user that might be able to throw your opponents off guard if they're not ready for it. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.